Welcome everyone to the first ever Lake Lewis Jr. show, and you know how we do things. I appreciate you from joining us, and this is going to be a fun one today. Everything we're going to do is for you, the fans out there, and I think a lot of us are excited about the NFL season, the Washington Commanders, the NFL as a whole. Well, on this show, you're going to get a little bit of both. Naturally, we're going to talk about the Washington Commanders because I cover this team. And this is actually my 15th season covering the Washington Commanders, albeit a little bit off and on, but nevertheless, we're still going to talk about that and break some great things down. And on Fridays, which today is, what we're going to do is we're going to bring in a big time person from the opposing team as far as their media. It could be a celebrity, it could be a little bit of everything, but we're going to bring someone on from New York Giants today because that's who the Washington Commanders are going to play on Sunday. And I'm really excited about today's guest. And in a few minutes, we'll be bringing him on. But we also want to let you know that this show is brought to you by Thermopack. And if you haven't learned anything about Thermopack from my previous shows, you'll know that this is one of those companies that's on the rise. They're doing some great things. They have an innovative mouth shield that is really something that I encourage athletes to take a look into and wear. And you can go to their site at thermopack.com for more information. So again, folks, this is going to be a good one for us. We're going to be breaking down so many things. And I got to tell you, last week I was in Tampa and witnessed the Washington Commanders losing that first game, and it was tough. It truly was a tough thing to watch. It was brutally hot outside, and I thought that the heat may have affected some of the guys. I know we spoke with Bobby Wagner this week during practice, and he said it did kind of affect him, So we're talking about a first ballot Hall of Famer, folks. So this isn't a bad thing, but I think what that showed is that maybe some guys need to get a little bit more run in preseason. When our guest comes on, I'll ask him because not only is he doing great things for the New York Giants as far as their voice, but he used to play for the Giants and got a Super Bowl trophy or Super Bowl ring back in 2007. So I'll get his take on preseason because obviously now the preseason is a lot shorter. It's 3 games. I think ultimately they're going to get away from preseason games altogether. I think that you're going to start seeing teams just totally go away from that. And it's going to be something that, it'll probably get to like college, we'll get to like how they do in college where they just practice all spring and summer. And then they have their first game in late August, early September. And that's what I think the NFL is going to go to. So before we get into today's show and all those other things, let's bring in my guest. And he really needs no introduction if you're up in the New York area. Brandon London does a great job for the New York Post, does some really good stuff for them. And, I'm really excited about having him on. I went on his show during the actual NFL draft and he asked me to come on. We went on, chopped it up, and we ended up knowing some people, some of the same guys. So he's with us right now. What's up, Brandon? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, man. What's going on? Thanks for having me on.
No problem at all, man. Listen, looking at this game, naturally, you do a great job with the New York Post, and you're a former player. You got that Super Bowl ring back in what, 2007. Also,
Yeah.
have a little side story for you, but your father actually coached at University of Richmond, where my better half is an alma mater from University of Richmond. So, anyway.
Okay, nice. He was at Howard as well, too, man. So that's how I got kind of put on to the Chocolate City and on like Howard, that my first Howard homecoming. I was like, bro, you need to stay here forever.
I
Like,
was gonna say, do you want to talk about that?
that
Been
was
there, done
man,
that.
that was a time and a half, but we loved it when my dad Mike London was at Howard, like taking the train down here from New
Yeah.
York to DC, and like I spent my first Sunday fun day in DC, like bar hopping and stuff like that. And I was like, oh man, I love that city. So I'm glad we got some Giants Commanders football going down. Both teams need the win. And it's just one of those things where on the Giants side of it, the fan base, the players, the media, everyone wants them to bounce back. Everyone doesn't want a slow start. No one wants to see any sort of hangover from what they put on tape or what they put on the field this past Sunday. So hopefully they can start fast, get off to a fast start against this Commanders team. Because if they don't, Washington's going to run the ball all over them, and it's not going to be the type of game Brian Dable wants to get into, I feel like.
Yeah, it's crazy because this used to be the marquee matchup in the NFC for years. Washington, the Giants, you knew perhaps even the winner of these games, they almost met three times a year because they were playing in the playoffs as well.
Yeah.
It seems like both these franchises are a little behind Dallas and Philadelphia right now. And
Yeah.
I don't know if the gap is that wide that it can't be made up in a year or two, maybe 2 or 3 years. But when you look at this game, the Giants are 7-2-1 in their last 10 against Washington. They
Yeah.
actually have owned the Commanders, and fans down here will tell you every time we've played the Giants, it's almost like you pencil that in as a potential win. And then they play some of their worst games. Does this game in particularly worry you more so than maybe some of the years past?
Yeah, just because, now it's a Dan Quinn led team. Dan Quinn 6-0 against the Giants is both a defensive coordinator and a head coach. We had Fred Smoot on our Blue Rush preview show the other day. And I mean, in his Southern drawl and his excitement, he was excited about the new ownership as well, man. He said he and a lot of players, a lot of the fan base, you could already kind of feel it within the community, kind of saying like he's never felt a vibe like that, amongst the franchise, or people just feeling something like that in a positive manner, amongst the organization, both player and fan base wise. So, you talk about Jayden Daniels and, Hard Knocks for Giants, I felt was great for publicity, but then bad at the same time, because a lot of the things that were said or was shown back then, now you're looking at it and you see some of the play within some of the players, or what Saquon's doing with the Eagles.
Yeah.
And you're like, man, like that, you kind of wish that didn't get out. And one of those things is, Brian Daboll saying how he wanted to trade up for Jayden Daniels.
Yeah,
Now, ultimately, they tried to trade up for Drake May, but the Patriots weren't having that. So now there's a lot of pressure on Daniel Jones. I know this is a get right game, or get back right game for Daniel Jones, who's had all types of success against the Commanders. But from what he showed Sunday, he looked a little off, man. It didn't look like the Daniel Jones that people were calling Vanilla Vic,
yeah,
at one point. So
yeah.
you're hoping that was just the fourth preseason game, but in a situation like this year, to where the New York Giants cannot start off this season 0-2, 100th season, all the expectations, everything that they're doing, from the activations to bringing in former players to the stuff around the community, can't start off 0-2, because you just don't have the track record of years past to be like, oh, they can turn this thing on at any point. 0-2 would be very damning.
Yeah, Brandon, I've said this before. Like, you don't want to say in a week 2 game that it's a must-win code red
Yeah.
game, but for these two franchises, it really is. Because if you're Washington, we were in Tampa last week, and it just didn't look like they had everything together. It was
Yeah.
really bad. It was a poor effort. I spoke with guys this week at practice in the locker room, and they attributed the weather. You've played in Tampa before, it's hot there,
Yeah.
but I thought we would see a lot more energy under Dan Quinn, the Joe Witt. That's something that they wanted. So I think that they now have everything that going for them as far as playing at home. But as we've said before, the Giants have come into Washington and played spoiler a lot. And I don't even want to use the word spoiler, but they ruined a lot of fans, coming out game. If you look at the overall keys in this game, naturally, Daniel Jones for the Giants has to play well. If he doesn't play well, you don't win the game. And like you said, he's had some career games against Washington, not just with his legs, but throwing the football.
Yep.
Daniel Jones struggles in this football game, and let's just say the Giants were to lose and go 0-2. Could you start hearing for people calling for Daniel Jones' head? Because the question is, who would back up Daniel Jones if they were to bench him?
Yeah, I mean, sports radio around here, sports media around here, there are people already calling for his head. See, we're in two different situations here, because the success or the excitement or the spark that we both are looking for comes down to quarterback play, but it's two different. We're on two sides of the railroad track. You got one guy in his 6th year. You got one guy who hadn't even played 6 games.
Right.
But Jayden Daniels gave enough that first game to where it's like what he can do with his feet. You're excited about it because you're like, all right, he could come around when it comes to throwing the football, pushing the ball down the field. Like to me, there's no reason why Luke McCaffrey should be the leading receiver when it came to the wide receivers, or Austin Eckler and Brian Robinson having more catches and targets than Terry McLaurin and Demir Bird. I feel like so that's going to come. Like when it comes to the advancement, the evolution of a Jaden Daniels, people wouldn't, a Brian Dable wouldn't want to trade up, to second overall for a guy like that. Right. If he didn't think that this kid is going to be a franchise quarterback one day. So you guys or the Commanders are going through the growing pains of, all right, we got a rookie quarterback. Let's see how fast we can get him acclimated. And CJ Stroud set the bar so high. Sure, but you remember, you look at CJ Stroud's first couple games, he was a roller coaster ride when it came to his performance and his consistency. So Daniel Jones, let's say Jaden Daniels throws 2 interceptions early. Mm-hmm. Commanders fans, the players and the coaches will be like, all right, how do we settle him down, or how can we remove some things from him? Are we putting too much on his plate? Yeah. If Daniel Jones throws 2 interceptions in the first half or early, the Giants coaching staff is now thinking, should we go to Drew Lock? So it's 2 different. We both need stellar quarterback play, but we're both on 2 different sides of the railroad track here.
Listen, the elephant in the room, obviously, is what we saw Saquon do with the Eagles in that first game in Brazil. And obviously that could not have shown well for Schoen, your GM. Who's under more pressure? Is it Dable? Is it Daniel Jones? Or is it your GM? Or is it more of a collection together? Are they a trio together? Who do you think is really the one that's under the gun, more to speak?
I think it's not a trio. It's more of a duo of a Joe Schoen, Brian Dable collectively. And then there's the Daniel Jones there. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they can get in some trouble because of, they did take heat, and they're going to continue to take heat for allowing Saquon to walk and paying Daniel Jones. But again, I realize why they did that, because to pay Daniel Jones, to get him Daniel Jones is like top, like 15 paid quarterbacks, highest paid quarterbacks in the league. So you gave him that deal at that time, not knowing inflation was going to tax when it came to what these Trevor Lawrences and Tua and these guys are getting, the very next season. Yeah. So when you look at it, okay, that was a smart play in that end, but at the same time, it was you couldn't have let a Saquon walk. It was just hard to see that happen. So I would say Daniel Jones, in terms of he's under the immediate heat because he can be benched if he doesn't play well. Yeah. And then there's a trickle effect. Now, if you bench Daniel Jones, can you get Drew Lock up to speed, playing well? To at least you got to stay competitive. One thing about the Giants is, like, you cannot be out of the playoff run or count early November, late October when it comes to that. So that could save the Brian Dables and Joe Schoens if you're able to, if Daniel Jones doesn't play well, but Drew Lock or Tommy DeVito, whomever it is, at least keeps you relevant. Yeah. Those guys are saved, I feel like, when it comes to that. But, they're doing some good things. I mean, the entire rookie class played this very last game, and some of them made plays. Malik Neighbors, 5 catches, 60-something yards. Musal, rookie linebacker, stepped in. His starting duties, got an interception. So some guys stepped in and, made some significant plays. But at the end of the day, man, like, we can talk logic and we can break things down. But these fans, man, this is the type of fan base and the type of media, they want your head. They want blood. So it doesn't matter. It's just one of those things where it's like, just go out, win football games. We'll talk about all this other stuff at another time. Just go win the games you're supposed to win. That starts on Sunday.
Yeah, that's the same thing with this fan base here. This was a once proud franchise, and a lot of old heads like myself remember those glory days. And it hasn't been anything since over the past 25 years. And, so there is a lot of hope. And I agree with you. What you saw with Jaden Daniels last week, even though he wasn't pinpoint accurate passing the ball, missed Terry McLaurin on a big, could have been a 65-yarder. You saw how dynamic he is as far as being an athlete out there with those legs. And you know that he was a really good passer at LSU, so it will come around. But with all this said, because I know you're pressed for time today, and I appreciate you coming on, folks. We're talking with Brandon London, does a great job for the New York Post up in New York, former New York Giant, former Montreal Alouette. I remember that, so he's with us today. So real quick, I'm going to put you on the spot because, I couldn't have you come on here and not expect a prediction. We have to do it. It's tough. I know you're beloved by your Giants fans up there, but you still have your job. You have to do it. So I'm going to put you on the spot. What do you see happening this Sunday down here in Washington?
I would say 17-14 Giants, and because the Giants need the game. I know the over is, I believe, at 43 and a half or
That's
something. And
too
I was
high.
like, from like where they do
No,
that
no,
at?
that's too
Like
high.
that's a lot. I'm trying to count up round to three, carry the one. Like where are them points gonna come
That's
from?
what
Like,
I'm
are you
wondering
serious?
myself.
But that's classic New York Giants football. Like you don't know. They could last year they laid the goose egg with the home opener against the Cowboys. The first half of the second game against the Arizona Cardinals, they did absolutely
Yeah,
nothing. And then they lit it up,
yeah.
came back and won the game in the second half of that second game. So it's like if people think like, oh, you got gray hairs from your kid. No, it's not from my 16-month-old. It's from the New York Giants football. That's where that comes from. So I'll go 17-14. I'm gonna keep it conservative, because I feel like Brian Daboll will still call somewhat of a conservative game on
Mhm.
this one. But if the Giants, if they're not hitting on the deep ball, then it's just going to be a long day. They need to put that deep ball back into into the mix
Yeah.
to at least threaten, the explosive play, and then they need to get some run game going as well. But I would say 17-14 Giants, and it may be a Graham Gano field goal at the end.
Graham Gano, former Washington Redskin, when he was here years ago. I'm going to take Washington in this game. I mean, I'm still thinking it's going to be close. I had them 2017.
Yeah,
They got a new kicker in this week, and if last week, if their kicker that they released makes a couple field goals, the game could have been a little different. I still don't think they would have
yeah,
beat Tampa, but it could have been a different game. I think this game is just equally important for both teams, and for what I saw against the Giants against Minnesota. I don't think they're as bad as they looked against Minnesota. Ironically, I don't think Washington looked as bad. They're not as bad as they looked against Tampa. So I'm going to take Washington clearly because they're at home and this is a desperation game. If they can't beat the Giants this week, it's going to be a long year. Matter of fact, my
yeah.
friend, I think whoever loses this game, it could get a little ugly before it gets better.
Yeah, that's not even like a Dion Ward prediction right there. That's just trust the science. That's just what it's shown us over the years. But I mean, at the end of the day, man, like they've always been battles. It's going to be a great one, and like the former player in me always. It's always that like Tuesday where it kicks in, where I'm like, I'm not even thinking about week one anymore. It's time to get prepared for week two and get on. But it's a game that both teams need, and it's going to be some good football. I feel like.
All right. Am I going to see you here Sunday?
No, I'm actually I'm emceeing the watch party here.
Okay.
So
All
here.
right.
So we got a
Okay.
whole like thing going on with the fans. Again, it's the 100th year celebration, so they're trying to do so much for the fans. So while it's early, it's like the weather's still nice, trying to be outside a little bit, like not up in a press box.
Well, who wants to be on 95 anyway? I totally understand.
Yeah, for real.
Well, I'll be in touch, my friend. And when we come up there, a couple weeks, I think they play later in the year, Washington's
Yeah,
rest of their NFC's games. I'll definitely get in touch with you and we can link up.
yeah, for sure, man.
All right. I
Thanks for having
appreciate
me
you
on.
coming on, man. All right. Take care. Have a good one now. All right, folks. Brandon London, again, you just saw that does a really good job covering the New York Giants. He said it with the New York Post. He said it himself. He's taking the Giants to win this football game 17-14. I'm taking Washington to win the game 20-17. I just think that I think they have more to lose than the Giants have to gain. And I know that may sound crazy and cliche, but I say that because you're at home now. The Giants already lost their game at home against Minnesota. Washington didn't fare well last week against Tampa, but that was against a NFC South champion, the defending NFC South champion that, lost to Detroit last year in the divisional playoff game. So for me, that was a tough win for Washington, even if they were healthy, even if they were clicking on all cylinders. Obviously add in the heat when it was brutally hot, one of the hotter games I've ever covered. but now you're home. The fan base are going to be excited to see Jayden Daniels, to see, perhaps Dan Quinn and Joe Witt and Adam Peters, just a new regime. There's a feel good vibe in the air about Washington. Maybe not from the X's and O's just yet, but just because it's new people who clearly seem to care about wanting to win and do the right things. So I think for Washington, they really have to come out here and make a good showing for their home base and get the W against New York so things can feel better, because you have to think about what's coming up after this game. We're gonna have to travel to, and I say we, not in the Commanders, just us in the media too. We're gonna have to travel to Cincinnati for a Monday night game against a Bengals team that looked absolutely dreadful last week in their home opener against the New England Patriots. Now they're going to be a team that's going to have to start trying to, come out the gate faster, considering they're in the same division, with the Baltimore Ravens, who I think are the second best team in the AFC. And then you have a Cleveland team that didn't fare well against Dallas, so they're going to have to play well. And then you have Pittsburgh trying to figure out their quarterback situation. So if you're Washington and you go down 0-2, realistically, you're not going to be favored and expected to beat Cincinnati and Cincinnati in prime time. So that could be an 0-3 start. And then you travel from there to the Arizona Cardinals, who are a much improved football team. And we saw that last week where they probably should have beat Buffalo up in Buffalo. So now it's tough sledding for Washington. It truly is. So look, folks, we're going to take a break. And when we come back, we're going to have a lot more here on the Lake Lewis Jr. Show. And I'm going to get a chance to talk to you guys about our Show Me the Money. You'll find out what players have to show the money this weekend. And I'm going to tell you right now, it's some frontline players that did not look like frontline players last week. So we'll have that and more when we come back here on the Lake Lewis Jr. Show. Hang tight. Welcome back, everyone, to the Lake Lewis Jr. Show. Appreciate you joining us. We're going to break down the Washington Commanders, some NFL talk, and every Friday, well, just remember, just so you know going forward, but every Friday I'm going to have a media member from the opposing team on breaking down what they think are going to happen, and I'll get a prediction from them as well. So we appreciate today's guest, Brandon London, former New York Giant player, also doing some great things with the New York Post up there. And he's kind of like their voice of the New York Giants right now. So appreciate him coming on. And he gave a prediction. He said that he had the New York Giants winning this football game 17-14, thought it was going to be a close game. I predicted it. I think Washington wins the football game 20-17. I think them being at home gives them the advantage. Obviously, they're 7-2-1 as far as the Giants against Washington over the last 10 games. So Washington has to do better than just getting 2 wins and a tie. They've got to come out and play some solid football, look a lot more disciplined than they did last week against Tampa. And I expect that to happen, folks. I really think that this team is going to be markedly improved compared to where they looked last week in Tampa. So one of the things that I said we were going to do when we came back was we're going to do a new segment here called Show Me the Money. And in this segment, this is where I say 3 players or 3 facets of the game that have to show out. They have to show the money in order for Washington to be successful and get the W. So right now, here we go. The first person that I think has to show the money for the Washington Commanders is none other than Jayden Daniels. Surprise, surprise, surprise. I know I'm putting a lot on a rookie quarterback just in his second start, but I think that what we saw last week in Tampa with Jayden Daniels shows how dominant of a talent he is and how dominant of a football player he already is, considering he's only had 1 start. If you go back to that Tampa game, he ran the football effectively against Tampa when they were blitzing heavily. The Giants do have great edge rushers. They have Brian Banks. They have Kayvon Thibodeau. They're going to have to be able to have Jayden Daniels contained in the pocket. And if Jayden Daniels can get outside of these guys, he'll have another big day with his legs. But I think the difference is, I think the Giants secondary is suspect. I truly believe that. And I think if you look at what Minnesota did last week, there's no reason why Jayden Daniels can link up with another guy that I think has to show me the money. And my second guy that has to do that is none other than Pro Bowler Terry McLaurin, the face of the Washington Commanders, at least for a couple more weeks until Jayden Daniels really inherits that position. But I think for Terry McLaurin, regardless if he's double teamed, if he's triple teamed, if he's chipped at the line, if he's press coverage, if there's a safety single high over top of that, Terry McLaurin still has to find ways to put his fingerprints on this football game. You can't have Terry McLaurin having two catches, one meaningless catch late in the game against Tampa. You can't have him having three catches. You can't have him having four catches, which unfortunately, and it's not all because of Terry McLaurin, but you can't have that. You just can't, because if you're a number one receiver, you have to make plays. Because when you look around the NFL and you look at the Justin Jeffersons and you look at the Jamar Chases, the Tariq Hills, you look at CeeDee Lamb, you look at any of these number one receivers, even a Brandon Ayuk who just got paid. These guys make plays. Their numbers are called frequently, and there's times where they make plays where there's no play to be made. Terry McLaurin has to do that. Is Terry McLaurin a top 10 receiver? He's right on the cusp. I have him at 12, excuse me, around the league. But that's still a really great football player. That's a really good, dominant football player for Washington. You need Terry to be that week in and week out if you're going to have any chance to win football games. So for me right now, it's a tandem. It's Jayden Daniels, it's Terry McLaurin. Those are two out of my three show me the money players. And then this is going to be a little bit of a surprise. My third show me the money, it's not even a player, it's a coach. It's offensive line coach Bobby Johnson. And I say Bobby Johnson because he was the New York Giants offensive line coach for the past previous seasons, and they didn't like him up in New York. Fans did not like him. I have friends up there, I have colleagues in the media, and he just wasn't, a guy that looked like he was getting the job done with the offensive line play in New York. Well, guess what, folks? I think he's done a heck of a job since he's been in Washington. I'm not drinking Kool-Aid. I'm not pushing Kool-Aid. I don't drink it. It's bad for you. It's too much sugar. But let me just tell you, if you look at what Washington has done across their offensive line, they have potentially a long-term solution at left tackle in Brandon Coleman. They really like him. I like him. I think he fared really well throughout training camp. Last week, he was kind of like platooning with Cornelius Lucas because Brandon Coleman was coming off an injury. But I think this is the week where Brandon Coleman is fully entrenched at left tackle. And then you look at everything else they've done across the offensive line. They brought in a new starting center. They brought in a new starting, right guard. You look at, excuse me, left guard. You look at everything they've done, from Allegretti to Biotic. If you look at all these different players that have come in, last week was really the first time that they played together. And they didn't play poorly. They absolutely, I thought if I had to give them a grade, I probably would have given them a C plus, maybe a B minus, but realistically a C plus grade. And I think that improves this week. The Giants can be ran on. And I think if you're Washington, and I think if you are Bobby Johnson, you're going to have to get your offensive lineman to get a hand on someone and lean on them a little bit and impose your will and get the running game going, because that's the best thing that can help your rookie quarterback, who can also help your franchise player right now in Terry McLaurin. So a running game with the offensive line leading the way opens everything else up for those other guys. So for me, those are my three show me the monies. All right, folks. I mean, it's going to be an interesting one this weekend. It's going to be in Washington. It's going to be a doozy of a football game, and I believe that. I think it's going to be an old school NFC East type of affair, smash mouth football. Whoever has the most turnovers, which is always the case in any sport, but specifically in this game, whoever leads the turnover margin wins the football game. That's just as simple as that. If you create turnovers in this game, you win the football game, because I do think points will be at a premium. I don't think you're going to have the spread, which is 43 and a half. Brandon and I just talked about that. They're not covering 43 and a half points. I just don't see that. I think it's going to be, 40 or less. And I think it's going to be, again, one of those old school NFC East type matchups. So again, I'm taking Washington 20-17. And as always, folks, if you want to follow me, you can check me out on social media, on pretty much all social media platforms at Lake Lewis Jr. Once again, it's at Lake Lewis, and make sure you put the JR at the end. And then, of course, you can follow me on sportsjourney.com, where the young guys are really doing some great things over there. I got a crew over there that's just outstanding, and they're pretty much running Sports Journey now, and I'm giving them the leeway to do what they have to do, and they're having a lot of fun with it. So really excited about where they're going with that. And then, of course, you can subscribe to this show. You can subscribe to it on every major podcast carrier, whether it's Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, SoundCloud. It's on there. And then if you want to watch this and subscribe to it so you can watch it, you can go to our YouTube channel, which is the Sports Journey channel on YouTube. And then, of course, you can go to sportsjourney.com. So as always, folks, I appreciate you joining me, taking time out of your day. Hopefully, when I talk to you again on Monday, it's with a Washington Commanders W under the books to even their record to 1-1. Have a great weekend, everyone, and be safe out there.